Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, friends and colleagues. I'm presenting 4 reports today. Country reports on Botswana and Chile, a thematic report on business, planetary boundaries, and the right to a healthy environment, and the summary of an expert seminar on the same topic. I'm going to start with the country reports. I'm grateful to the governments of Chile and Botswana for their excellent cooperation with my mandate both before, during, and after the visits. I visited Chile last May. Now, Chile is a naturally water-scarce country, but the climate crisis is exacerbating the problem. And to make matters worse, laws privatized water so that mining companies and agribusinesses have water for their operations, but tens of thousands of people lack access to safe and sufficient water. Another grave problem in Chile is the presence of sacrifice zones, places where profit and private interests have been prioritized over human health, human rights, and the environment. I heard heartbreaking testimony from indigenous people, children, and their parents. Chile should prioritize remedying these human rights violations by requiring businesses to reduce pollution, relocate or close, by rehabilitating contaminated ecosystems, and by compensating victims. Chile is making progress, closing coal-fired power plants, enacting stronger environmental standards, but more must be done for people living in sacrifice zones. I visited Botswana last October, and Botswana is a world leader in conserving biodiversity, but substantial challenges remain in ensuring that everyone has access to safe and sufficient water, healthy and sustainably produced food, adequate sanitation, clean air, and waste management services. Indigenous peoples and rural populations are disproportionately affected by the absence of these essential goods and services, especially children, interfering with their full enjoyment of their human rights. Botswana is naturally hot and dry, but the climate crisis is causing devastating impacts, worsening water scarcity, food insecurity, and human-wildlife conflict, which is harming the lives of vulnerable groups. The government has many good climate and environmental initiatives underway, but must focus on improved implementation. One of the most promising things is that Chile and Botswana are 2 of the world's most promising states for solar energy. In the past decade, Chile has become a solar superpower, generating a larger share of its electricity from the sun than any other country. Botswana has similar potential to become a solar superpower, but needs stronger policies and access to international climate finance. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now turn to my thematic report on business, planetary limits, and the right to a healthy environment. Earth provides a life support system for 8 billion people and millions of other species, but we are in the midst of an unprecedented planetary crisis. Humanity's colossal impacts are already exceeding 6 planetary boundaries and are close to a 7th. Put simply, we are sabotaging Earth's life support system with profound consequences for human rights. Many businesses are abusing the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment by polluting air, water, and soil, by exacerbating the climate crisis, devastating biodiversity, producing and marketing unhealthy and unsustainable foods, and releasing toxic substances that poison humans, wildlife, and ecosystems. Transforming the role of businesses is among our paramount challenges. But today's economic paradigm is based on exploiting people and nature. Among the flaws of this paradigm are short-term thinking, a belief in limitless growth on a finite planet, a narrow focus on maximizing profits for shareholders, and the externalization of health and environmental costs onto society. For example, fossil fuel companies make hundreds of billions of dollars in profits annually, while their products kill literally millions of people and exacerbate the climate emergency. The planetary crisis is also linked to grotesque and growing inequality. The richest 1% are responsible for the same volume of greenhouse gas emissions as the poorest 66% of humanity. And the economic costs of the planetary crisis are staggering. More than $8 trillion in health and environmental damages, more than $10 trillion in damages from food production. Now, paradoxically, businesses have a vital role to play in achieving the just and sustainable future. Some businesses are already producing or using 100% renewable energy, producing products that are reusable, recyclable, or compostable, and using regenerative approaches to farming, fishing, and forestry. By investing in clean energy, a circular economy, public transport, and electric vehicles, we could create more than 40 million new jobs by 2030. Now, to address the substantial impacts of business on human rights, a number of normative frameworks have emerged, including the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. Unfortunately, few businesses are implementing the actions required to respect human rights because these frameworks are not legally binding. All businesses have a responsibility to respect all internationally recognized human rights, including the right to a healthy environment, throughout their value chains. This responsibility exists over and above compliance with national laws and regulations. Yet many large businesses are environmental criminals, and enforcement is rare. Even when investigated, prosecuted, and convicted, penalties are inadequate. The largest environmental penalties in history, $35 billion against Volkswagen for their dirty diesel scandal, $65 billion against BP for their deadly Deepwater Horizon oil spill, had absolutely no long-term impact on the share prices of those businesses. I learned so much about the devastating impacts of business on human rights that I actually wrote an extra report called Prioritizing Profits Over People and the Planet. Large businesses are undermining the enjoyment of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment by greenwashing, deceit, denial, sabotaging science, corruption, and other strategies that exploit their immense economic and political power. DuPont, one of the world's largest chemical companies, knew in the 1960s that one of their products, perfluorooctanoic acid, or PFOA, was toxic. By the 1980s, senior management knew that exposure to PFOA caused birth defects, thyroid disease, testicular cancer, and kidney cancer. They discussed their options: stop production, improve environmental practices, or maintain the status quo. And they chose to prioritize profits and continued to pollute, causing disastrous damage to human health, the environment, and human rights. And this example is not an exception. This pattern of behavior goes across many industries, including tobacco, chemicals, plastic, motor vehicles, fossil fuels, and others. They deny the science, attack advocates of solutions, and exaggerate the costs of change. Now, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, unfortunately, states are complicit in the planetary crisis. States encourage, enable, and subsidize destructive business activities. But states have a duty to protect human rights from actual and potential harm that may be caused by businesses within their territory, jurisdiction, or control. States must establish strong laws, regulations, and policies, including comprehensive human rights and environmental due diligence legislation, and must effectively monitor and enforce these laws. Because we are exceeding planetary limits, humanity needs to shrink its collective ecological footprint. Yet billions of people in the global south need to use more energy and materials to achieve a good standard of living and fully enjoy their rights. Wealthy states therefore must take the lead in reducing their footprints and financing equitable and sustainable growth in the global south. The recent recognition of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment has game-changing potential if states and businesses comply with their obligations and responsibilities. Transformative changes required to fulfill the right to a healthy environment include replacing the narrow focus on GDP and economic growth with more holistic development indicators, enacting rights-based climate and environmental laws that incorporate planetary limits, taxing all forms of environmentally destructive behavior, replacing business paradigms with models such as benefit corporations, and shifting to a human rights-based economy. In conclusion, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has warned that there is a rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. The choices and decisions implemented in this decade will have consequences now and for literally thousands of years. So in the darkness that envelops so much of today's world, the right to a healthy environment is like a shining star in the night sky, guiding us towards a brighter future where humanity flourishes within planetary limits, and everyone, everywhere, lives a fulfilling life in harmony with nature. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I look forward to your questions.